Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states, and MLSConsumerAccess.org, number 3030.
Welcome to Farm Year Daily, a Field Forward podcast. I'm David Geiger, your host. I've been on Iowa TV and radio for the last decade, and I am excited to join you on this new podcast, Farm Year Daily. Today on the program, we'll take a detailed look at the soybean gall midge. Erin Hodgson, an entomologist with ISU, will speak about that. Then we discuss nominations opening up for local Farm Service Agency county committees with Karen Rawson. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast and check out our social media at Field Forward Pod. We would love to have you join our community, keeping folks informed about what is affecting our farmers. This is Farm Year Daily. And joining us on Farm Year Daily, we have Erin Hodgson, ISU Extension entomologist, joining us. Erin, really glad to have you on the program, and I'm excited to talk about some of the pests that are within the borders of Iowa today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic as well, and I wanted to jump right in with one of the more recent additions to Iowa, and that would be the soybean gall midge. I'm not sure how much information you have on that. Is that something you guys have been following at ISU?
Yes, I have been in it since the beginning, since the first detection in Iowa, and working collaboratively with adjacent states that are also dealing with it: Nebraska, South Dakota, and Minnesota.
Now, the gall midge is really interesting because I recall learning that it is not necessarily an invasive species. It's just one that we haven't seen until now. What information do we know?
Yeah, you're right. Typically, when you hear the word invasive, it means like it came from somebody somewhere else. And so usually from like Asia or South America, and it accidentally makes its way into the United States. But soybean gall midge is a little bit different because it's not known to occur anywhere else in the world. So this is a new fly that popped up in soybean around 2019, so a couple years ago. And of course, when it starts to impact field crops, we start to get really excited about it from an entomology perspective. And so we've been doing research on it for a number of years, a couple different ways we're trying to manage the pest. But yeah, it's not known to occur anywhere else in the world. So I can't really say it's invasive. More likely it was a host shift from another type of legume that was maybe in the central part of the United States and fell over into soybean and decided it could use it as a food source.
So what you're saying is the leading theory right now, or hypothesis at the moment in the science community, is that it was something maybe in a prairie and it just existed as a species, and one day there was some sort of breed within it that said, hey, I can eat soybeans.
Yeah, this happens occasionally where members of a pest population can feed within a plant family, in this case the legumes, and that does happen. And when there's sporadic legumes in a native prairie, you don't maybe notice that population or a pest might be there. But when you have the intensified agriculture that we do in Iowa and some of the other states where there's millions of acres that are concentrated, that's when a pest population can really build up. And then in this case, it can kill plants. And so that's the immediate economic concern of farmers, is the plant death.
The immediate thought I have with it not being an invasive species is that would imply that there is a level of environmental control that should be pre-existing within something like the state of Iowa. Do we know if there's any animals or other insects that prey on the soybean gall midge?
Yes, it's a great question, more of an ecological question, but it is one of those things that a few of us were thinking about. Could there be a biological control component or another insect or animal that likes to eat soybean gall midge? And so that work has been led by Dr. Bob Cook at the University of Minnesota. And he's had a couple students work on it. And when you start to dig and you collect larvae and you're able to do, really intense surveys over those areas, he was able to discover at least two parasitoid wasps that attack soybean gall midge larvae. And so this is a great scientific find. These are brand new species that, they haven't been described yet before. So it's a discovery in that way, but finding them injecting eggs into larvae. And it's fantastic to me because the larvae are inside of a soybean stem. So that wasp has to locate a soybean stem that's infested and then inject an egg through the stem and inside of a larva. To me, it just seems kind of like sci-fi in a way. But yes, there are larvae that have been parasitized by wasps. And over a couple different years, we've seen variable parasitoid rates, and sometimes as high as 10% of those larvae would be parasitized by these wasps. And so there is some level of biological control happening for soybean gall midge.
I wonder too if there might be even a use of wasps to just locate it, because that's sometimes the hardest part, is even finding where the soybean gall midge even is.
It's so difficult because at first plants look fairly normal, and you wouldn't be able to see it walking through plants or on the edge of the field. You wouldn't be able to notice it, and so you don't typically see that, like a plant being stressed, until they either have been infested for quite a while, or they're on their way out. And by that I mean like the plants are wilting, stunted, and probably not going to make it.
A practice that I learned just this year, and it could have been moving so far for a couple years now, but I've just heard about it this year as one of the primary ways to deal with soybean gall midge is to actually move the soil up towards the stem of the plant. Is that right?
It is. This work has been organized mostly by Justin McMecken. He's an entomologist at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And we're just trying to create basically a physical barrier, because female midges like to lay their eggs at the bases of plants or right above the soil. And that's because there's some fissures that develop when soybean plants are growing very quickly. So it sort of provides a weakness that makes it easier for females to lay eggs. And so his idea was, well, let's cover up those fissures with soil. And it does work. It's a temporary fix if you're able to have that equipment. But the kind of snag is you have to be a very careful driver, because the plants are so small. So right. They're only a few inches tall. And so the idea is to build up the soil around the stem when plants are just emerged. And for some, that's a really difficult thing to do, because you end up just running over a lot of plants or kind of burying the plants. But it does provide sort of this temporary physical barrier that the females have a harder time laying eggs in those plants.
Are there any other methods that entomologists are looking at to help either prevent or deal with infested plants?
Oh my gosh, the list is very long. We have tried a lot of different ways, and basically every type of strategy that you can think of for like a plant pest in agriculture, we have tried at least some way to see if that might work for soybean gall midge. There are some things that are in the hands of farmers, like planting date, row spacing, crop rotation, seeding rates, seeding depth, like all those agronomic things people have tried in some way or another, even mowing, burning the edges of, like if the soybean field happens to be bordering like a grassy or a waterway, trying to eliminate some of that vegetation that they might use for refuge. There's a lot of those, what I would call cultural control techniques, that really haven't been consistently effective. And then we are looking into the obvious things like insecticides, because that's usually like the easy choice. It's the easy button for pest control in field crops, is to use an insecticide. But because the larvae are inside the stem, most of the products that we have access to don't work, because they work by either ingestion or contact. And so they're not reaching the larvae and not effective. And so that's been very frustrating, because the easy choice has been not very successful. We also have been spending a lot of time and energy looking into the germplasm of soybeans, so going deep into the germplasm that's hosted at the University of Nebraska and looking for or screening for a wide variety of genetics that maybe the midges don't like, or maybe they don't do as well. And so that screening process has been happening now for at least 4 years, and we're getting stronger and stronger responses now through this screening process. And I'm really excited this year we have like larger plots that we can evaluate, because before we were looking at really small plots because it was sort of older genetics. And so the plants look more normal now, or more modern, and I'm very, very hopeful. I'm putting a lot of eggs in this basket of germplasm that we would be able to incorporate so that the beans just basically tolerate the feeding a bit more, or just are simply not attractive. Plus many, many other things like biocontrol and some of the more technology focused things where you're looking at remote sensing and looking at some of the computer applications that you can incorporate for detection and maybe survey.
Right. Now, your points there just made me feel like I might have buried the lead on this question.
Oh, okay.
And that is, how pervasive is soybean gall midge among the soybean crops in the Midwest?
Yeah, so far we've only seen them on soybean, which is great. We haven't seen them on alfalfa, which is another legume. And the first couple of years that we found them, it was basically Nebraska and Iowa the first couple of years. And there was a very strong field edge bias where most of the injury, most of the activity was restricted to the field edges. And because they are a small fly, they're not strong flyers. Normally what would happen is if you planted soybean and corn in a rotation, it would just kind of bounce back and forth between those fields, say within a farm. And so the injury was restricted to field edges. But as the pest has expanded in range to, as I said, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Kansas and Missouri now, that pattern has sort of dissipated, in which you don't see that really strong edge effect as pronounced as it was the first couple of years. So you have maybe diluted where the flies are more spread out or more uniform throughout the field over time. And so the injury doesn't look as pronounced as it did the first couple of years. And so that the initial detection is a bit harder to find. But I think it's somewhere over 150 counties in, let's see, 6 states now. So it's just kind of slowly growing north and south, east and west each year, in which we found a few more counties in those areas with positive detections. But it doesn't necessarily mean if you have midges, you're going to have a problem, because we've seen kind of higher years, lower years, even in areas that have been heavily infested before. They've sort of gone up and down in intensity, kind of like with any pest. You have bad years and you have good years of injury. And so that pattern is sort of evening out now to where you don't see that strong edge effect and you see more uniform infestations, but it's kind of increasing in range.
It might be a little a personal way to describe it, but when you look at this pest as an entomologist, how alarming do you find it? Is it something to be very worried about? Is it something to be mildly worried about?
Yeah, I think I'm really worried about pests that can just straight up kill plants, or pests that cause direct injury to like seeds, kernels, flowers. Anything that can significantly impact yield, or is an economic concern, is something that I spend all my time on, really, on research and extension, are minimizing those negative economic impacts. And so it doesn't take very many larvae inside of a stem to cause plant death, especially if they are infested pretty early. And so if you have plants that are breaking off at the base, they're not contributing to the overall yield. And so that it's definitely raises my spidey senses, to have a pest that can be so tremendous as far as measurable yield loss. And this is compared to something like soybean aphid, which I have spent, decades looking at, where you could have 2,000 aphids per plant or 5,000 aphids per plant. And if you get enough moisture, you wouldn't really see those negative yield impacts quite as drastically as you could for soybean gall midge. And so, pests have these different injury potentials, and soybean gall midge is just one of those pests that has a potentially high injury potential. And in some cases, like I said, just killing the plant. So that's an immediate concern for me, and something that, I don't want it to happen to farmers where they have like yield maps where you can see like big strips or big pockets of dead plants.
Erin, if folks are interested in learning a bit more about gall midge, maybe they see it on their own farm, maybe they're trying to prevent it, are there some resources at ISU Extension they could find to learn more about it?
Yeah, because this is such a collaborative project and mainly funded by the North Central Soybean Research Program, we have decided to kind of pool our efforts and put a lot of research, upcoming events, and even a lot of free webinars that we have every winter on soybeangallmidge.org. And that is a place where we kind of host, what's the current distribution, what are some research projects, and we provide copies of those webinars if you're at all interested to learn a little bit more. But that's where it would have sort of the research component that we would then kind of boil down into some main talking points. But if people are interested in like seed treatment evaluations, foliar insecticides, those kinds of things, those kinds of details would be at soybeangallmidge.org. And if at all interested, we also have an alert network that you can subscribe to via phone or text or email to kind of keep in the loop of what's happening, this season in your area. And that's a free service that you could subscribe to just to kind of keep in touch a little bit better.
Erin Hodgson is an ISU Extension entomologist and on Farm Here Daily with us. Really appreciate your time. I feel like we just barely scratched the surface of what there is pest-wise in Iowa, so I'll just have to try to get you on again some other time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, every week in entomology is something different, so it's exciting from my point of view being in Extension. Next week, we'll be talking about rootworms, and then it's Japanese beetle, and so on and so on. And so, yeah, have me back because next week it'll be a different conversation.
Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Thanks again, Erin. This is Farm Here Daily. We'll have more conversations on the way, but first let's take a look at the Monday market close. And there was some red across the board at the end of the day. July corn, 9.5 cents weaker, $4.19 1/4, with September falling 8 cents at $4.17 1/2. Soybeans in July, 9.25 cents down at $10.58 3/4, with August falling 9.5 cents at $10.62. Soybean meal in July, $1.70 a ton, in the red at $282.40. July wheat, 15 cents weaker at $5.52 3/4, with September falling 14 cents at $5.69 1/2. In the livestock market close for Monday, June live cattle down 72 cents a hundredweight at $222.30. August falling 45 cents at $209.37. Feeder cattle in August 35 cents a hundredweight higher at $302.80, with September rising 40 cents at $302.62 a hundredweight. Lean hogs in July 67 cents a hundredweight higher at $113.45, with August an increase of 60 cents at $113.05 a hundredweight. That is the Monday market close. This is Farm Here Daily.
Choice Hotels get you more for your money so you can maximize any road trip. Like these road trippers making waffles and eating fresh fruit in their natural habitat. The breakfast area at a Comfort Inn. I just love seeing a vacation maximized in the wild. Check into more. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
And joining us on Farm Here Daily, we have Karen Rawson, Deputy State Executive Director of the Iowa Farm Service Agency. Karen, very glad to have you on the program. How are you doing? How's the Iowa FSA doing?
Doing great, David. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're seeing some nominations open, which is why I wanted to talk to you, going for the county committees around the state of Iowa. Can you tell me about that?
Of course. Um, our FSA County Committees is an elected base, and we have a nomination period that just began here June 16th, and it runs through August 1st. And our county committees, we have one in each of our 97 offices for Iowa. And in that, we accept nominations for a specific local area, administrative area. And there's usually one LAA for an acronym per county.
And when you're looking at these LAAs, who are you looking for?
Well, these happen to be farmers. There is an eligibility that a nominee must meet. To be eligible to serve on a FSA county committee, the person must reside in that local administrative area, or LAA, that is up for election. So they're going to be in that county. They're also a producer. They can be a landowner and maybe lease their land out, but they can also participate as a county committee. And the cooperating producer is someone who's, has provided information about their farming and ranching. Does not mean that they have applied for FSA benefits, though.
What exactly does someone on this committee do?
Well, that is the best part. So with our FSA county committees, the background to this is the committee actually enables the producer to make important decisions on how federal farm programs are administrated locally to best serve the local community needs, make determinations on hiring decisions, and assist in local education and outreach efforts. So the FSA committee members are local ag producers who help ensure fair and equitable administration of FSA farm programs in their county or multi-county jurisdiction. And they are under the general supervision, though, of our state committee. And basically, they are the eyes and ears of the producers who elected them.
Would there be an example maybe of something in the past few years that you've seen that was really impacted by the folks who were on the committee or participating on the committee?
Well, an example of what would happen is in determining the flooding that happened up in northwest Iowa last year.
Right, yeah.
So a county committee will actually meet and decide, okay, there's enough of a disaster event here from flooding, is that example, to open up a specific type of program. And that program was the Emergency Conservation Program, or ECP. Under that program, it would then allow producers to apply for repairing the damage from that flooded area. And in some instances in that area was fencing. Fence, the water ripped out all that fence, and so they're able to apply for some benefits for assistance.
Yeah, I think immediately after you said that, that must have been a big part of some derecho response as well when we had that a few years ago.
That is true. The committees have to really, they're involved with any severe weather events in the community. And that includes even tornadoes. We've had that happen even in, again, it was kind of northwest Iowa, it was in Sac County particularly, where a tornado went through and basically distributed debris from buildings that were damaged, and it distributed it throughout the cropped field. And so that ECP program allowed them to apply for some benefits to assist with getting all that cleanup accomplished.
I am curious as well, are there other events or disasters? I think of, we just last year ended I think 4-year-long drought that was just pretty extreme in many parts of Iowa. Were there eventually getting points where folks were meeting in these committees to talk about that?
Not quite so much on the drought side of it. Because of the fact that with the drought, it's much more of a widespread area, and the approval process is a little bit different.
Right.
What the committees would be looking at would be an implementation of potentially another program that they would have to approve. The drought primarily affecting livestock forage. And so if it meets all the criteria for the drought to open a livestock forage program application period, then the committee has to go through and, of course, approve or disapprove any applications for that.
Going back to the committee, folks say they're interested. What type of time commitment are you looking at if you're on a committee?
It's not a daily event. Our committees generally will meet face-to-face anywhere from 1 to 2 times a month. They may be called on the phone in between, though. And so when they meet, it is normally no more than about 4 hours when they meet in person.
Karen, I believe that there's some appeals process that goes on within counties. Does the committee deal with that as well?
Yes. Our FSA County Committee members actually apply, their judgment, their experience and knowledge when making local decisions to help deliver FSA programs and services. And with that is a producer appeal. So if a producer receives a determination that is an adverse determination, they have the option to appeal that back to that county committee and give their side of the story. And the county committee will then render an appeal decision at that point in time.
And if you were potentially interested in this, if a farmer was potentially interested in serving on the USDA Farm Service Agency County Committee, what would be the best way to go about it? Do you have to be nominated first? Do you have to talk to a few people? What type of elections are held? How does that work?
Well, the nomination period, of course, like I say, is open right now. And so, number one, they would have to live in the local administrative area that is up for election. So they would need to determine if they're in that particular LAA. If they don't know, they can certainly call the local office and they will tell them. There is also a tool that public can go to, and it's the fsa.usda.gov/elections, and they can find a GIS tool there that will tell them, okay, which LAA am I in? The form itself, the nomination form, the person would need to sign, and they can nominate themselves. It's not where they have to have a specific number of signatures on that. And the form for a nomination is an FSA 669A. They can find this online, or they can call the local office.
This may be a bit of a weirder question because I was thinking about you talking about you have to live in the LAA. If you were a farmer that had most of your cropland on in one county, but your farmstead, your house just happened to be in another county, would you have to be in the county that you have fewer acres in?
Normally, we look at their farming operation.
Oh, okay.
So the advantage of that, of course, is just what you said. If they live across the road from where their land is, but almost all of their land operation is in that LAA, we can assign them to that particular LAA.
Well, honestly, that's what I would have hoped would be the case, but I've learned in 12 years of farm broadcasting, you can't always assume that type of stuff, but that's definitely good to know, farmers making sure that they're on committees for the county that they're mostly in. That's great. Looking at another aspect that you were mentioning, you were talking about some of the parts of the committee that works on just looking at the issues of a county. And I wanted to separate and go to another topic, and that is some of the reporting that goes on at FSA. Right now is kind of a time where farmers can go into their local office and talk about what's going on their operation. Is that something that they can do right now?
Correct. At this time of the year is when we perform our acreage reporting for where the crops are planted. And the deadline for that is actually July 15th, so we do still have some time. And we encourage producers as soon as they can, once they've got the crops in the ground. And I know there's always waiting for that rainy day to come into our office to do this, but come in and get those crops reported, because they will use those reports. If they have crop insurance, they can also give that report to their crop insurance agent.
Why is it important to make sure to go in and get that done?
Our acreage reporting is kind of the basis of a lot of our programs. It's kind of that foundation. And so with that, it's reporting, how many acres you have. It also goes into a bit of variety. So are you doing soybeans, or are you doing seed corn, or are you doing regular corn, or are you doing sweet corn? We report all the crops, so that is not just corn and soybeans. So we report pastures, the hay, vegetables, fruit. So all of that data is gathered in our office, and that's then again, that product is utilized into other eligible programs.
Karen Rawson, Deputy State Executive Director of the Iowa Farm Service Agency. Really appreciate having you on Farm Here Daily to go over these nominations and the acreage reporting going on at FSA. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again, Karen. This is Farm Here Daily, a field-forward podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, in order to continue to produce this type of local content, we would love to have you join our community. So please follow the podcast and check out our social media at Field Forward Pod. And if you feel inclined, shoot it over to your friends. Additionally, you can find me on social media at Geiger Reports, as well as WHO TV Channel 13 every weekday in their morning and noon hour programs. Again, I'm your host, David Geiger, and I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.